stars weep their final light across a dying sky. Fading constellations shimmer like memories slipping from grasp, while shattered worlds drift silently in the void, monuments to empires long forgotten. Amidst this cosmic twilight, the echoes of an ancient civilization tremble on the edge of oblivion. We truly love and care for you, dear listener. Before we begin this journey, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, grab your coffee and let's get started. The Eldar Empire, once the brightest jewel of the galaxy, now flickered like a dying ember. Vast starcraft drifted silently between forgotten worlds. Their spires, once aglow with arcane energies, stood cracked and crumbling under the weight of time. The webway, that labyrinthine realm of spirit and light, throbbed faintly with echoes of a glory now past. But beneath the quiet, a storm gathered, one that would unravel millennia of pride and power. At the heart of this empire stood Eldrinath, Phoenix Lord of the Alatok craft world. His form was clad in shimmering carapace, etched with runes that glowed faintly, remnants of ancient rites. He bore the weight of endless years, his mind a repository of memories too vast for mortal minds. Yet in his eyes flickered a shadow, the slow, relentless ache of eternity. He stood atop the crystal terraces overlooking the city of Kelter, watching distant suns bleed their last light across the horizon. How many ages have I witnessed, he thought, and still the dawn eludes us. Immortality was no blessing. It was a ceaseless vigil, a burden of endless watching while all around him decayed. Friends turned to dust, enemies rose and fell like tides, and yet he remained, unchanged, unyielding, yet wearied beyond words. The echo of a whispered betrayal tugged at his thoughts. Rumors swirled of dissent among the Eldar, factions torn by ambition, alliances fraying in the shadows. The ancient bonds that once held them together were cracking. Who could he trust when even the brightest stars harbored dark secrets? His mind flashed to Kalith, a once trusted ally whose loyalties had begun to waver. Was this the price of survival? To watch kin turn against kin in desperate grasp for power. Eldrinath's heart, though wrapped in eternal flame, ached with a sorrow that burned deeper than any wound. Beyond the empire, the galaxy itself churned with menace. The ravenous forces of chaos stirred, eager to feast on the Eldar's fading light. The Silent King's ancient enemies moved with cold precision, ready to strike when the time was ripe. Yet Eldrinath knew the greatest battle would be fought not in the stars, but within the hearts of his people, and within his own. Could he hold the empire together, or was it doomed to shatter like glass under the weight of its own hubris? As the twin suns of Kelter slipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the crystalline spires, Eldrinath whispered a solemn vow. For all that we have lost, and all that remains, this empire shall not fall without a fight, even if I stand alone against the coming darkness. The air shimmered with ancient power as the Phoenix Lord turned from the fading light, stepping into the labyrinthine halls of his ancestors. The first threads of destiny were weaving a tapestry of war, betrayal, and sacrifice. The fall of the Eldar had begun, and with it, a story written in fire and sorrow, stretching across the stars. The crystalline halls of Kelter whispered with echoes of ages past. Each step Eldrinath took resonating like a heartbeat in the silent cathedral of his ancestors. The weight of immortality bore heavily upon him. Yet even in eternal life, he wasn't immune to the creeping frost of doubt. He sought counsel with Melithra, the seeress of the Veil. a figure as enigmatic as the shifting currents of the warp. Her eyes, pools of swirling starlight, held secrets Eldrinath dared not voice aloud. She spoke in riddles, weaving visions of fractured futures and shattered allegiances. "The threads unravel, Phoenix Lord," she intoned, her voice a haunting melody. "The Empire's foundation trembles beneath the weight of forgotten sins. The past calls to claim its due." Eldrinath's gaze hardened. Memories flickered, whispers of the fall, when the Eldar's own hubris birthed horrors that scarred the very fabric of reality. A time when brother turned against brother and the stars wept blood. In this fragile peace, shadows grew. Calith, once a trusted confidant, had vanished into the labyrinthine corridors of political intrigue. Rumours whispered of his alliance with the enigmatic corsairs, outsiders whose loyalty was as fickle as the shifting stars. Beneath the polished veneers of diplomacy, Eldrinath sensed a poison spreading. The craft worlds, once united in purpose, now edged toward fracture. Each sought to secure its survival, even if it meant betrayal. Amidst this growing storm, Eldrinath found a flicker of solace in the presence of Silara, a young warrior whose spirit burned fierce and unyielding. Her courage rekindled a spark within him, a reminder that even in twilight, embers could ignite anew. Yet Silara bore her own scars. Haunted by visions of doom, she questioned the price of their endless struggle. "How long can we fight shadows?" she asked, eyes glinting with defiance and fear. "Is immortality a gift or a curse, if all we do is watch the world crumble?" Her words echoed Eldrinath's own torment. They were bound not only by duty, but by a shared understanding of loss, the heavy cost of survival in a galaxy turning to ruin. As the moons rose over Koltha, Eldrinath and Silara stood upon the battlements, gazing into the void where stars once blazed with unyielding light. The war to come was no longer just against external enemies. It was a crucible testing the very soul of the Eldar. The Phoenix Lord's voice was steady but tinged with sorrow. "We stand at the edge of oblivion. Trust is fragile, and the web that holds us is fraying. Yet, if we fall divided, all shall be lost." Silara nodded, her grip tightening on the hilt of her blade. "Then we must find the truth in the shadows, no matter the cost." Beneath the surface of a dying empire, loyalties would be tested, and choices made in silence would echo across the stars. The slow unravelling had begun, and with it, the fate of the Eldar would be forged in fire, blood, and betrayal. The endless webway shimmered with fractured light, a labyrinth of ancient pathways connecting the farthest reaches of Eldar space. Eldrinath moved through its shifting corridors with measured grace, each step a silent testament to centuries of vigilance. Yet the familiar glow felt colder now, an omen whispered by the shadows themselves. News from the outer rim bore grim tidings. The corsairs, wild and merciless pirates once dismissed as mere nuisances, had grown bold. Their fleets raided vital supply routes, and their allegiance to the fractured Eldar was uncertain, veering like a tempest on the edge of ruin. Worse still, whispers hinted that Calith had crossed into their ranks, betraying the very kin he once vowed to protect. In the council chamber of Keltir, Eldrinath faced his advisors, a gathering of weary souls burdened by prophecy and fear. Among them was Valeris, the cold and calculating master of shadows, whose loyalty was as enigmatic as the void. His words were sharp, cutting through the heavy silence. "The corsairs no longer serve as pawns," Valeris warned. "Their allegiance is a blade poised to strike. Calith's betrayal endangers all we have fought to preserve." Eldranath's eyes burned with restrained fury. Then we must act swiftly. The webway is our lifeblood. If it fractures, the Empire falls. Solara stepped forward, her youthful resolve tempered by harsh reality. I will lead the strike force against their strongholds. But know this war is not only fought with blades and fire. We face a cancer within. The room fell into a tense quiet, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down like the void itself. As preparations began, Eldranath sought solitude in the halls of memory, where echoes of past glories and tragedies lingered in crystalline vaults. Here, the ghosts of ancient Phoenix lords whispered counsel and warnings. Among them, the visage of Eldranath's mentor, Serene, emerged, a spectral flame flickering with quiet sorrow. You carry the weight of eternity, Eldranath, Serene's voice resonated. But remember, even the brightest flame must sometimes burn itself to ash to be reborn. The words settled deep within Eldranath's soul, a haunting reminder of the sacrifices yet to come. Outside, the stars themselves seemed to darken, as if mourning the impending storm. The galaxy trembled on the brink of cataclysm, a collision not only of fleets, but of fractured hearts and broken promises. As Solara's forces prepared to engage the Corsairs, Eldranath steeled himself for the battle ahead, aware that victory might demand more than valor. In the shadows of war lurked the deeper wounds of betrayal, and the true cost of survival was yet to be revealed. The fall of the Eldar was no longer a distant prophecy. It was a tide rising, unstoppable and merciless, and within it, the fragile hope of redemption flickered like a dying star. The thunder of engines echoed through the void as Solara's strike force surged toward the Corsair stronghold, a shattered asteroid fortress known as Vexis Prime. The cold stars bore silent witness to the unfolding storm, their distant light failing to penetrate the growing darkness that clung to the edges of the Eldar's fading empire. Within the command deck of the flagship Starfire's Grace, Solara stood resolute, her eyes aflame with a fierce determination, tempered by the weight of looming sacrifice. Every moment pulsed with tension, a fragile thread between hope and despair. The battle was not just for territory. It was a test of loyalty, a crucible in which the very soul of the Eldar would be forged or broken. As the fleet descended upon Vexis Prime, a tempest of fire and shadow erupted. The Corsairs fought with savage desperation, their hatred sharpened by betrayal and bitter survival. Amidst the clash of energies and the roar of void cannons, Solara found herself face to face with an enemy she never expected, Calith. His eyes, once filled with brotherly trust, now burned with cold calculation and bitter resolve. You still cling to dying dreams, Solara, he spat, voice laced with regret and defiance. The Eldar Empire is a corpse, and I choose to dance on its bones. A silence fell between them, thick with the ghosts of shared memories and fractured loyalty. Solara's hand tightened around her blade. Then you will fall with it. Their confrontation was a tempest of clashing steel and bitter words, a duel not only of blades, but of ideals. Each strike echoed the fractures within their hearts, each parry a question of faith and betrayal. Elsewhere, Eldranath wrestled with his own torment. News of the battle reached him through whispered transmissions, painting a grim portrait of sacrifice and loss. The Empire's fractures deepened, and his own doubts gnawed relentlessly at the edges of his mind. In the solitude of his chambers, he traced the ancient runes etched upon his armor, symbols of a legacy weighed down by millennia. His voice was a low murmur filled with sorrow and resolve. To endure is to suffer, but to surrender is to die twice. The battle at Vexis Prime raged on, a microcosm of the wider war consuming the Eldar. As blades clashed and ships burned, the fragile hope of unity flickered perilously close to extinction. In the quiet moments between storms, Eldrinath and Celera both understood the bitter truth. The fight was no longer just against external foes, but against the erosion of trust, the slow poison of betrayal that threatened to consume them all. The fall of the Eldar crept closer with each passing day, and within its shadow lay a choice: survive through unity or perish divided by treachery. The shattered remnants of Vexis Prime drifted silent in the void, a graveyard of ambition and broken oaths. The Corsair fleets had been beaten back, their bastion reduced to drifting shards of rock and fire. Yet the victory tasted bitter on the tongues of the Eldar. For every ship lost, every warrior fallen, the fractures within their own ranks widened like chasms beneath fragile crystal bridges. Eldrinath stood before the High Council, their faces a mosaic of fatigue, suspicion, and unspoken fears. The victory had come at a cost. Calith's betrayal was no isolated wound, but a symptom of a deeper rot. Whispers of dissent grew louder, carried in the shadows by those who sought to reshape the Empire in their own image, indifferent to the ruin it might bring. Trust is a weapon we wield too carelessly, Eldrinath spoke, his voice low but unwavering. The Empire stands on a precipice. We must bind our wounds before the abyss claims us. Melithra, ever the enigmatic seer, stepped forward. Her eyes glimmered with an eerie calm, reflecting visions only she could see. The past and future are threads intertwined. To heal, we must confront the darkness within, not just in others, but in ourselves. Celara's youthful fire had tempered into a steely resolve. She had seen too much blood spilled in the name of survival, and the price weighed heavily upon her. I will root out the corruption, no matter where it hides. But we must act swiftly. Time is a luxury we no longer possess. Eldrinath nodded, feeling the fragile threads of unity strain under the weight of impending war and internal betrayal. His thoughts drifted to the silent king, the shadowy figure who once ruled the Necron dynasties, immortal, yet bound by an ancient curse of duty and loss. Was Eldrinath's fate to mirror such eternal torment? To live, watching all he loved crumble into dust? In the quiet of his chambers, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. The eternal flame etched upon his armor seemed to flicker in sympathy with his doubt. How does one endure eternity without losing oneself? He whispered to the silent stars beyond the crystalline walls. Outside, the webway trembled. Unknown forces stirred in the depths, creatures older than memory, drawn by the faltering light of the Eldar. The true enemy was not merely the Corsairs or fractured alliances. It was the slow decay of hope itself. Eldrinath's hand clenched into a fist. The coming days would demand sacrifices unlike any before. Loyalties would be tested, alliances shattered, and the line between friend and foe blurred until only shadows remained. The Empire's fall was no longer a whisper on the wind. It was a gathering storm, and its eye was fixed squarely on the heart of the Eldar. The shadowed halls of Kelthir grew colder as Eldrinath paced beneath vaulted ceilings that seemed to absorb the weight of his doubts. The city, once alive with the vibrant pulse of arcane energies, now hummed faintly, like a heartbeat slowed by exhaustion and fear. Outside, the twin moons cast ghostly light upon crystal spires fractured by time and turmoil. Celara's report echoed in his mind, a grim tally of losses and betrayals. Her strike teams had uncovered unsettling truths. secret cabals working to undermine the High Council, agents who whispered sedition amidst loyalist ranks. The enemy was no longer just the corsairs or the warbands on the edges of their realms. It was within. Eldrinath summoned Melithra to the Chamber of Echoes, a sanctum where past and present intertwined. There the seeress closed her eyes, letting the swirling mist reveal visions both terrible and illuminating. "The web tightens, but so does the snare," she intoned. Calith's betrayal is but the surface. Beneath lies a deeper rot, ancient grudges, buried sins, and ambitions that poison the soul. Her words struck at the core of Eldrinath's fears. The Eldar, once masters of fate and fortune, were now captives to their own unravelling. The immortality they bore was not a shield, but a chain, binding them to endless cycles of loss and regret. Solara entered then, bearing the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Trust fractures like glass, my lord. To rebuild, we must first shatter what remains and forge anew." Eldrinath's gaze hardened. "And at what cost? How many must fall before we find redemption?" A silence settled, heavy and unyielding. Outside, distant echoes of war drums stirred the night, heralding battles yet to come. In the solitude of his chambers, Eldrinath reflected on his own journey. Centuries of leadership, sacrifice, and the slow erosion of hope. His immortality had become a burden, each age adding layers of sorrow too deep for words. The line between enemy and ally blurred, and the shadows within grew bolder. The Empire's fall seemed inevitable, a tragedy written in stars and blood. Yet, amid the encroaching darkness, a faint ember of defiance burned. Eldrinath knew that even in the bleakest night, a single spark could ignite a blaze to challenge fate itself. The coming days would test not only the strength of the Eldar, but the very essence of their souls. Betrayal would be met with sacrifice, loyalty with heartbreak. The slow fall of an empire was underway, and its price would be paid in fire and tears. The skies above Kelta darkened, not from the dying suns, but from a gathering tempest, a storm born of fury, betrayal, and desperation. The Eldar Empire trembled beneath a veil of shifting allegiances, its once glorious spires casting fractured shadows over a realm on the edge of ruin. Eldrinath stood atop the highest terrace, the weight of countless centuries pressing down upon him like a suffocating shroud. His eyes, once bright with the fire of eternal hope, now mirrored the storm clouds, brooding, restless, and heavy with untold sorrow. News had come from the borders. The Necron dynasties, ancient and merciless, had stirred from their cryptic slumber. Silent legions marched beneath void-black banners, their inexorable advance a dark reminder of the fate that awaited all who faltered. Their resurrection protocols, cold and implacable, defied even the Eldar's timeless grace. Yet, it was not only the Necron threat that gnawed at Eldrinath's soul. Whispers within the council spoke of darker betrayals, secret pacts forged in shadow, alliances traded like currency among those who once pledged unity. Calith's treachery had shattered trust, but the rot ran deeper still. Solara's voice broke through the storm of his thoughts. The Corsairs regroup in the outer webway, gathering strength with allies unknown. They seek to tear open the paths we hold sacred. Eldrinath's jaw clenched. If the web fractures, the Empire will bleed dry. We must confront this darkness before it consumes us. A sudden tremor rippled through the webway. The very veins of Eldar existence quivered as ancient chains cracked and unraveled. The storm was no longer distant. It was here, engulfing friend and foe alike. Within the council chamber, tensions erupted. Valerius accused loyalists of sedition. Melithra warned of unseen forces manipulating their fate. The fragile bonds of trust splintered, replaced by suspicion and fear. Eldrinath raised his hand, voice a commanding beacon amid chaos. Enough. We stand at the precipice. Our enemies circle, and our own house is divided. But the fall of the Eldar will not be born of weakness. He turned to Solara. Prepare the strike fleets. Rally those still loyal. This storm will be met with fire. As the first thunder cracked across the void, Eldrinath's heart bore a silent burden. The knowledge that the battle ahead was as much for the Empire's soul as for its survival. Beneath the tempestuous skies, the fragile hope of redemption flickered, a last, desperate flame against the gathering darkness. The webway pulsed like a wounded heart, veins of shimmering light flickering with uneasy cadence. Across its endless pathways, fleets of Eldar vessels surged forth, silent phantoms woven from crystal and shadow, bearing the hope and fury of a dying empire. The storm that Eldrinath had warned of was no longer a distant threat. It had erupted, tearing through the delicate threads that bound the Eldar together. Solara stood on the bridge of the Moonfire's wrath, eyes fixed on the swirling maelstrom ahead. The Corsairs had rallied dark allies from the shattered stars, their fleets swollen with warbands hungry for plunder and vengeance. But worse still was the creeping whisper of betrayal that haunted the edges of their own command. Trust had become a currency more precious than Ethereum, and suspicion the poison that corroded their ranks. Beside her, Valeris observed with a calculating gaze, his mask unreadable. The webway itself is fracturing. Each breach invites enemies both known and unknown. Solara's jaw tightened. Then we must seal the fractures, no matter the cost. In the heart of the conflict, Eldrinath's presence was a beacon, his armor blazing with ancient runes that flickered like dying stars. He moved among his warriors, offering words of solace and steel, even as his own heart carried the weight of endless ages. The battle erupted in bursts of searing light and shadow. Starships danced a deadly ballet, weaving between rifts where the fabric of reality thinned. Eldar warriors, swift and merciless, struck like lightning, but the enemy was relentless, corsairs and renegades fueled by desperation and dark bargains. Amid the chaos, a message arrived, a cryptic warning from Melithra. The true enemy hides beneath the surface. The Empire's greatest threat is not outside, but within. The words echoed in Eldrinath's mind like a dirge. His gaze hardened as he realized that salvation would demand sacrifices beyond the battlefield, choices that would fracture hearts and shatter legacies. As the stars wept their cold tears, the fragile unity of the Eldar teetered on the edge of ruin. The webway's fractures grew wider, and with them, the echo of a prophecy long feared, a fall written not only in blood, but in betrayal. The phoenix may rise, but even the brightest flame must burn to ashes before rebirth. The shattered remains of the webway pulsed with an eerie glow, a fractured network trembling under the weight of war and deceit. Eldrinath's thoughts were a tempest, swirling with visions of ruin and the fragile threads of loyalty unraveling before him. Each victory felt hollow, each sacrifice a step closer to oblivion. Solara returned from the front lines, her face etched with exhaustion and determination. The battles had taken their toll, but more devastating was the revelation that certain factions within the High Council conspired to seize power, exploiting the chaos to further their own ends. The betrayal was no longer whispered in shadows. It was a blade gleaming in the light of day. In the sacred halls, Eldrinath confronted Valeris, whose cold eyes betrayed the weight of secret burdens. "You harbour your own ambitions," Eldranath said quietly, "and the Empire bleeds because of it." Valeris's gaze was unyielding. "Survival demands sacrifice, Phoenix Lord. Sometimes the Empire must burn to rise anew." The tension between them was a mirror of the Empire's fractured soul, pride and pragmatism locked in an eternal struggle. Meanwhile, Maelithra's visions grew darker, revealing the spectre of a looming catastrophe, a collapse not just of worlds, but of the very essence of the Eldar. She warned of an ancient force awakening, drawn by the weakening of the warp's delicate balance, a force older and more merciless than any enemy faced before. Eldranath felt the crushing weight of eternity pressing down upon him. To lead was to endure endless loss, to carry the sins of millennia. His immortality was a prison, and yet he could not turn away from the fate unfolding before him. In a moment of rare vulnerability, he confided in Celera. "We are but sparks in the dark, flickering against an endless night. But even the smallest light can defy oblivion." As the Empire's foundations cracked and allies became foes, Eldranath resolved to face the coming storm with unyielding resolve. The fall of the Eldar was no longer inevitable. It was a battle to reclaim their soul before the final darkness consumed all. The hollow echoes of the council chamber lingered long after the voices had faded, leaving Eldranath alone with the weight of decisions too grave for words. The air hung heavy with betrayal, the fragile trust between allies shattered like brittle crystal underfoot. The Empire's heart beat unevenly, its rhythm faltering beneath the strain of endless conflict. Calith's treachery had unleashed a cascade of fractures, rippling through the web of alliances and igniting old wounds long thought healed. Shadows crept through the halls, whispers of conspiracy entwining with the thunder of distant war drums. The Eldar were no longer united by purpose, but divided by suspicion and fear. In the solitude of his chambers, Eldranath grappled with the torment of immortality, a gift that chained him to a cycle of loss and longing. His mind wandered through memories of fallen kin, victories turned to dust, and the slow decay of hope. The endless passage of time had rendered him both witness and prisoner to an empire's slow unravelling. Celera's voice, steady and fierce, broke through the darkness. "We cannot afford to fall into despair, Phoenix Lord. Our people look to us for strength, for guidance." Her words were a beacon, a fragile thread woven from the tapestry of resilience. Together, they devised a plan, a desperate gambit to root out the corruption festering within and rally the fractured factions to a common cause. As the webway trembled beneath unseen forces, Eldranath prepared to confront not only external enemies, but the ghosts of his own past. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and the cost of survival demanded sacrifices that would scar the soul. The Empire stood at a crossroads, poised between annihilation and redemption. The choices made in the shadows would echo across the stars, shaping the fate of the Eldar for millennia to come. In the gathering storm, Eldranath whispered a solemn vow. "If we must burn to rise, then let the flames forge a new dawn." The twilight of the Eldar Empire cast long shadows across the shattered realms, where once proud cities now lay silent beneath skies choked with ash and sorrow. Eldranath moved through the ruined halls of Keltir, his armor dimmed by the weight of unspoken grief. Every step echoed like a dirge for the fallen, a lament woven from centuries of sacrifice and fading hope. The betrayal of Calith had fractured more than alliances. It had splintered the very soul of their people. Eldranath's mind was a battleground where memories clashed with harsh realities. The faces of comrades lost to treachery haunted his dreams, their voices a chorus of regret and warning. In the dim light of the war chamber, Selara stood beside him, her youthful spirit tempered by the fires of war. "The enemy is not only without," she said quietly, "but within. We fight for more than survival. We fight for the future of our race." Eldranath nodded, his gaze distant yet resolute. "Immortality is a curse and a gift. To endure is to suffer the endless loss of all we cherish." News arrived of a hidden stronghold, an enclave where dissenters and traitors gathered in secret, their machinations threatening to shatter what little unity remained. Eldranath knew the time had come to confront the darkness festering in the heart of the Empire. The assault was swift and merciless. Eldar warriors moved like shadows, their blades singing death in a dance as old as time. Yet, even victory was stained with sorrow. Friends were lost to the blade, and the echoes of betrayal lingered like poison. As the dust settled, Eldranath faced a bitter truth. The fall of the Eldar was not solely wrought by enemies without, but by the fractures within, by pride, fear, and the unbearable weight of endless years. In the quiet aftermath, he whispered a vow to the stars: "We are the last flame in the darkness. Though we fall, our light will not be forgotten." The Empire teetered on the brink, its fate entwined with the choices yet to come. The war for the Eldar's soul was far from over. The restless silence of the void was shattered by the relentless pulse of war, a symphony of destruction echoing across fractured stars and shattered worlds. Eldranath stood upon the bridge of the celestial dawn, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where enemy fleets coalesced like storm clouds hungry for annihilation. The webway trembled beneath the weight of countless battles, its ancient pathways scarred and unstable. The Corsairs and their shadowed allies pressed their advantage, exploiting every fracture in the Eldar's defences. Yet the greatest peril lay not in the weapons of war, but in the chasms opening within the Empire's own heart. Silara's voice was steady despite the mounting chaos. "Our people are divided. Trust is a rare gift, and betrayal more common than breath." Eldranath's eyes, burning with the fire of ages, met hers. "We stand at the precipice, but even in the deepest abyss, a spark can kindle a new dawn." In the war chamber, the council debated fiercely. Old grievances surfaced, accusations flared, and fragile alliances threatened to collapse entirely. Valeris, ever the shadow in the light, spoke with cold pragmatism. "Unity is a luxury we cannot afford. Survival demands harsh choices." Melithra's gaze pierced the turmoil, her voice a haunting melody. "The webway's fate is tied to our own. To save the Empire, we must confront the darkness within and without." As Eldranath prepared to lead a decisive strike against the Corsair strongholds, he felt the crushing burden of immortality, the endless witness to rise and fall, to hope and despair. The cost of survival was etched into his soul like a scar that would never fade. The coming battle would test the limits of loyalty and sacrifice, forcing impossible choices upon those who dared to stand against the gathering darkness. The fall of the Eldar was no longer a distant shadow, but a raging inferno, threatening to consume all that remained. The battle raged like a storm of fire and shadow, tearing across the fractured realms of the Eldar Empire. Eldranath stood at the heart of the maelstrom, his armor ablaze with the ancient runes of his lineage, symbols of a glory that once shone brighter than the stars themselves. Yet now that light was flickering, threatened by the crushing weight of betrayal and relentless war. The Corsairs, bolstered by renegades and shadowed allies, pressed their assault with ruthless fervor. Their ships, jagged and twisted, moved like venomous serpents through the shattered corridors of the webway. Every strike carved deeper wounds into the fragile veins of the Eldar's existence. Within the council chambers, whispers turned to shouts as allies turned against each other. Valerius revealed his true allegiance, a calculated betrayal born of desperation and dark ambition. The revelation shattered the last fragile bonds, plunging the Empire into chaos. Silara, her blade stained with the blood of kin and foe alike, faced Eldrinath with a fierce sorrow. "We are fractured beyond repair," she said, voice trembling with the weight of countless losses. "How do we fight when the enemy is both without and within?" Eldrinath's gaze was steady, but beneath his calm lay a tempest of pain and resolve. "The cost of survival is steep. We must choose, sacrifice what we love to save what remains." In the shadow of the dying suns, Eldrinath made the ultimate choice, ordering the sacrifice of the sacred city of Kelter to halt the Corsair advance. The decision was a blade that cut through the Empire's heart, a final, desperate act to save a flickering hope. As flames engulfed the crystalline spires, Eldrinath watched the city burn, the smoke rising like a dirge for a fallen age. The betrayal, the sacrifice, the unending war, all converged in this moment of tragic clarity. The Empire's fate hung in the balance, poised between annihilation and the faintest spark of redemption. The burning ruins of Kelter cast a hellish glow against the void, a pyre for an empire teetering on the edge of oblivion. Eldrinath stood amidst the ashes, the weight of his choices etched into every scar upon his ancient armor. The flames that consumed his city were not just of fire, but of sacrifice and shattered dreams, an offering to stave off the darkness that threatened to swallow all. Silara's voice, trembling yet resolute, broke through the choking smoke. "We have paid too dearly. How many more must fall before this ends?" Eldrinath's gaze, weary but unyielding, met hers. "The end has already come, in many ways, but from ashes, new stars may yet be born." In the council chambers, fractured alliances dissolved entirely. Valerius, revealed as a puppet master pulling strings of chaos, was confronted and struck down, a grim testament to the Empire's unravelling. Yet his death offered no solace. It was but a single thread in a tapestry of betrayal. Melithra's visions grew more desperate, revealing glimpses of a future where the Eldar faded into legend, their immortality a curse that left them as hollow ghosts wandering dying stars. Eldrinath faced his own reflection in the shattered crystal, a visage worn by millennia of loss, a leader burdened by the cost of eternity. The sacrifices made, the blood spilled, and the love lost weighed heavier than the armor he bore. As the last embers of Kelter smoldered, Eldrinath knew the final battle loomed, a confrontation not only for survival, but for the soul of the Eldar. In that moment, beneath the dying light of fractured stars, he whispered a vow, not of despair, but of defiance. "Though we fall, our spirit endures. We will rise again, or be consumed trying." The fall of the Eldar was near, but the fire within their hearts burned fiercely still. The void was silent, a heavy stillness settling over the shattered remnants of what once was the Eldar Empire. Eldrinath stood alone upon the highest tower of the ruined Kelter, gazing out into the endless darkness where dying suns flickered like fading memories. The weight of eternity pressed upon him, each breath a reminder of the endless cycles of loss he had borne witness to. Around him, the remnants of his people scattered like shards of glass, some seeking refuge in distant stars, others lost to the madness that immortality had wrought. The empire, once a shining beacon of light and grace, lay broken and bleeding, a testament to the price of ambition and betrayal. Eldrinath's thoughts drifted to those he had loved and lost, the comrades who had fallen in battle, the kin who had turned against him, the innocents caught in the storm of an empire's decline. Immortality was not a blessing but a curse. To endure beyond the span of generations was to watch all one holds dear fade into oblivion. He traced the ancient runes carved into his armor, their glow dimming like the dying stars themselves. "What is eternal life if not endless mourning?" he whispered to the void. Yet even in the depths of despair, a fragile ember of hope remained. The sacrifices, the betrayals, the wars, they had not been in vain. In the ashes of the old, a new dawn awaited, fragile but unyielding. As the first light of a distant sun pierced the darkness, Eldrinath closed his eyes, embracing the weight of his fate. He understood at last that true immortality was not in endless life, but in the legacy one leaves behind. The stories whispered among stars, the echoes of courage and sacrifice that outlast even the void. With a final resolute breath, he turned from the ruins, stepping into the unknown, carrying with him the hope that the Eldar's fall might one day give rise to a new beginning. The stars watched silently, witnesses to the end of an era and the quiet promise of rebirth, the end